We have a very exciting panel ahead, and we look forward to your engagement as well along the way. My name is Dr. Sally Saba. I'm the Global Chief Inclusion Diversity Officer and the President of the Medtronic Foundation at Medtronic. If you don't know Medtronic, it's probably a good thing because you know us if you need us, so to speak. But we are the largest global medical device company in the world. And most people know us if they've known somebody who has a pacemaker, because we are the inventors of the pacemaker. We also have technologies that treat more than 70 diseases, and we exist in 150 countries around the world. We're here today to talk about an area of opportunity, and I'm going to just take a couple of minutes to set the stage as to what that opportunity is, and then we're going to get to learn from this amazing panel that we've orchestrated here for you. Many CEOs, including our own Jeff Martha, in their circuits, one of the biggest things that is coming up for them as a challenge that they need to solve for is workforce. Not workforce like just are they available now, but do they even have the skills for what is to come in the future? So I'm going to share with you some stats that kind of set a stage for us here. The healthcare industry is going to experience a crisis of shortages of skilled workers where 40% of workers' skill sets will transform or become outdated in the next 5 years. It's a big deal. If you couple that with the fact that 65% of students who are in school today are going to work in jobs that don't even exist yet, that's a compounding and stacking challenge to our industry. At the same time, 80% of adults that are aged 25 to 29 in low-income communities globally can't find a secure job. The students who could move us forward are at risk of being left behind, especially with how fast technology is advancing. So Medtronic has a mission statement. Medtronic has been around for over 75 years. And core to our mission is contributing to human welfare through biomedical engineering. And if we are in an industry that's going to be really disrupted by AI in a really good way, while workforce shortages will also be compounding for us, it behooves us to do something about that as a leader in this field. And that's where our program that we're launching comes to life. Medtronic Foundation is going to be launching a program called Medtronic Spark. It's a 10-year commitment to allow and enable 1 million students from low-income households to be sparked into a career into health tech. We're going to do that through 3 different avenues. We are hoping to have what we call an innovation lab, a Spark lab, where youth can come and tinker with and get excited about technology within the human body, technology at large. And then we're going to provide scholarships. And these scholarships aren't just the standard one where you get something to get into school. We want to actually create scholarships that help you get through and out of school. So it's a slightly different design for how we're working through those. And the third piece, which I'm most excited about, are our credential programs. These are going to be free certificates and credentialing programs for real life-sustaining jobs within the health tech field. Like, they are so good, and you will have access to them globally. And when you finish that, a company like Medtronic would employ you. So we want to play that part in really creating that pipeline for development of talent around the globe. So we're really excited about that and want to play that role. But we are new to this space. We've had a foundation for a really long time, and we've partnered with a lot of STEM enablers and programmers and things, but we hadn't before really taken on our own. We are going to design these things with our own name on them and really try to charter this path. So we're trying to come with it, at it with a bit of humility and learning from the best, those who have been there before and know what the challenges really are for the youth. And today is the sparking of that conversation. It's the first time we're actually announcing this publicly, so we're really excited to be here and doing that. So, enough of hearing from me, and I apologize, my voice is a little raspy because I've been dealing with some laryngitis, but our panel here doesn't have that, so we're going to turn it to them. This is a panel of experts and leaders who have been not only part of, but they've been enablers of success in this field in terms of different approaches to workforce development, including skills-based hiring for quality jobs, credentialing and apprenticeship building, educational innovation for private sector through programs like Multiple Pathways initiatives, and targeted youth segments with innovation, STEM, and education programming. So instead of me doing a bad job with this voice and introducing them, I'm actually going to turn it over to each of them to introduce themselves in just a second. However, I did want to highlight that at the end, we will open it up for Q&A. So if you have a question, please think about it. And then we're going to ask you to come up to one of those mics if you have one, and we'd be happy to respond to it. So I'm going to turn it over now, and we'll start with you, Maria, if you can introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself before we dive in.
Great. Hi, good morning, everyone. It's great to see everyone here, and congratulations on today's announcement. It's really exciting, and it's just a wonderful example of how we love seeing industry really step into this space and really be proactive about building the talent pipeline that they need. So congratulations. I am the president and CEO of a national nonprofit organization called Jobs for the Future, and our mission is to drive equitable economic advancement for all. And we do that pretty much in every state of the country, working through partners at the federal, state, and local level. So really everyone from government agencies, community colleges, K-12 districts, employers, technology-based startups, really across the ecosystem to design and scale interventions that help learners and workers move into quality jobs. And so we have a big North Star goal that I encourage everyone to get involved with, which is that by the year 2033, we want to see 75 million US workers who face systemic barriers to advancement working in quality jobs. And a lot of times we get the question, what do you mean by a quality job? So I'll just very briefly say we have 4 kind of buckets of criteria that we look at. So the first being your basic kind of compensation package and benefits. The second being structure, making sure that there's kind of reliability and stability in the structure of the job. The third being agency, does a worker have voice in their job? And the next being advancement, is there an opportunity to advance in your career from that job? So looking forward to talking more about that.
Let's give Maria Flynn a round of applause for being here with us. Over to you, Craig Maloney.
Thank you, and I'll echo Maria's comments about the ambition of the foundation. I'll say this, having worked with Medtronic now for a while, if the results you've already driven in your programs match up with the foundation's ambition, it's going to be a raging success, so congratulations. My name's Craig Maloney. I am the CEO of InStride. InStride is in the business to help employers solve their talent challenges. You'll hear me refer to the outside in and inside up model of talent development. We work on both sides of that, and we work with employers like Medtronic to identify programs that, as Maria said, attract, develop, promote talent, and it's been really wonderful to work with a number of employers like Medtronic and Chick-fil-A and Amazon and a number of healthcare systems to help them solve through education, whether it's degree or non-degree, certificate or stackables, the different models that work for the employers in order to drive their strategies. So I'm thrilled to be with you today. Thank you.
Thank you, Craig. Let's give Craig a round of applause. And over to you, Carol O'Donnell.
So my name's Carol O'Donnell, and I'm the executive director of an organization within the Smithsonian Institution called the Smithsonian Science Education Center. So how many of you have ever heard of the Smithsonian? All right, perfect.
Lots of hands out there.
And while you hear from the introductions of the others, this idea of focusing on jobs and credentialing and making certain that students are prepared for the workforce, how many of you have ever been in grades kindergarten through 12th grade? Okay, so that is my job, right? My job is to make certain that by the time students get to the two of you or to Medtronic to work, the ideas that they are prepared. So our center, the Smithsonian Science Education Center, is the only organization of the Smithsonian that focuses on formal K-12 education, but that also means what do students do in school, out of school, after school, summer school. So there are lots of opportunities to engage with students. And our mission is transforming K-12 education through science, technology, engineering, and math in collaboration with communities across the globe. And we do that through 3 goals: promoting innovation, as you heard about this Spark Innovation Labs, promoting innovation in STEM education, promoting inclusion so that all students and teachers have access to STEM opportunities and can recognize themselves in STEM, and promoting sustainability so that STEM education can be used to prepare students for a more sustainable future.
Thank you, Carol. Let's give Carol a round, everyone. Thank you. Okay, now let's dive in. I know we all like anecdotal data, but when we have real research data, it really drives better decision-making and agendas that are more long-term. So my ask, and I'm gonna ask all 3 of you, but I'll start with one. What is a key stat or data point that when you learned of, it really stuck with you as you began in this space? And then beyond the stat, what's an example of a program or area of focus that you've tackled to move the needle on that stat? And I'll start with you, Craig, and then we'll go to the others.
Great. I'm actually going to build on the stats you've already shared, and I have 3 stats that kind of collide. So the first one is 87% of employers today realize that they have a problem with internal skill development, either today or in the next 6 months. Okay. Then the next stat is of that group, 75% acknowledge that they're not actually doing enough to address the issue. And then on the other side of the equation, 67% of employees we polled said that they don't think that their employer is doing enough to develop their skills so they can have a career path. So when you put all that into the primordial stew, that is a problem and not a very good tasting stew. So what we've tried to do in partnership with Medtronic is we try to look at it a couple different ways. Number one, we worked through a re-credentialing process. We looked at job groupings, we talked to the HR teams, we talked at role profiles, and what we ended up doing is re-credentialing role profiles away from degree requirements and into skill-based requirements. I think at this point we have approached 150 different role profile changes across HR, IT, sales, and operations, which, I mean, that's a pretty big cut of the organization. So we're very happy with that, and we'll talk about some stats in that later. And then another thing that we've done is we worked with the team to identify what are those high priority roles, and then what are the academic programs we can develop with our academic partners, whether it's degree or non-degree, to get those folks on a path to improved mobility, improved promotability, higher paying jobs. And we'll talk about some of the successes, but kudos to the Medtronic team. They've been changing the space in terms of re-credentialing. It's really impressive.
Well, it's been a great partnership, Craig, and I like to point out to people that if the largest global health tech in the world can have jobs that do not require 4-year degrees, so can everybody else. So thank you for the partnership, and we are making good strides there. I'll go to you next, Maria. What about you? What's the stat?
Yeah, I'll dig in a little bit back to our North Star, around 75 million U.S. workers who face barriers to economic advancement, working in quality jobs, and just talk a little bit about how we ended up with that number. So we based this off of some research and survey work that Gallup did several years ago. And we found out that if you look at kind of these 4 large kind of population segments that do face significant barriers to advancement. It's workers of color, it's women, it is individuals without a 4-year college degree, and it's individuals who have been impacted by the justice system. And if all told, the total number of those workers in the US labor market right now is about 90 million. And currently only 38 million of that 90 million work in what we would consider a quality job. So we got to the 75 million really by saying, like, we want to double that number in essence in 10 years. So it's a really bold goal. It really requires new types of action and approaches, not just on the employer side, but really on the whole ecosystem side. And I think it's really relevant to today's conversation because I do think that jobs in healthcare and technology and health tech really fall largely into that quality jobs category. And so the work that we do at JFF obviously is a part of this, but it's a small part compared to the work that needs to be done. So we have engaged Gallup to do a new survey that looks at this. We're going to have initial results of the new survey in June, so it's something to look forward to.
That.
And we have also launched what we're calling a 75 million network, which all of you are welcome to join, and really an effort to really start to kind of galvanize the field about this movement. And I think that, you know, as we see, like, just in the political discord and kind of the divisiveness like that we're feeling in our country today, to me, a lot of that ties back to folks who are not feeling that they have good jobs, right? They're not feeling economically secure. So it's like, can this be a path forward that can really, you know, be something that everyone can agree about?
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Carol.
Yeah, I mean, for me, in terms of the question of what facts kind of drive our work, when I started my job in 2015 as the executive director of the Smithsonian Science Education Center, the Sustainable Development Goals had just been released. And of course, we're halfway there, past halfway there to 2030 and trying to achieve them. And so I was trying to look at some of the statistics around where we are. When there was a survey that was done last year by DevEx and EY, and they surveyed over 1,000 people who are in, professional industries, and asked, of all of the 17 SDGs, or Sustainable Development Goals, which range from life on land to life in water to climate action, sustainable communities, which one of these do you think is the most important in terms of how AI or technology-enabled AI could launch and make that achievement even greater? And what the answer was that the 89% of the respondents said that the number one SDG that could benefit from technology was good health and well-being. And that's out of 17 different goals. In addition, when they were asked which of these goals is most likely to, or which of these goals is most likely to change the most rapidly because of technology, in addition to saying good health and well-being, they also said innovation in industry. And so this work is bringing those two SDGs, if you will, together. And the rapidity of that is that it's going to happen quickly. So 73% of the respondents said within the next year, this industry will change very rapidly. So getting ahead of it is important. And so the Smithsonian Science Education Center is trying to educate youth on these important topics, including through our Smithsonian Science for Global Goals project, biotechnology, which brings together good health and well-being and innovation. And so this is really crucial, the work that you're doing, and surveys are supporting, and facts are supporting that.
Thank you, Carol. Since you kind of have the proverbial mic, I'm going to lean into you again with the next question. Because part of the reason that we decided part of Medtronic Spark will have this hands-on experiential learning component to it through our innovation lab was because of some of this research that we did around how hands-on active learning produces better results than traditional kind of classroom being spoken at, reducing failure rates by 55%, and increasing exam scores by an average of 6%. So Carol, how has the Smithsonian Science Education Center seen this come to life from that aspect?
Yeah, one of the hardest things in education is studying the impact. And I know later we'll talk a little bit about the importance of measures.
Yeah.
And so at the Smithsonian Science Education Center, we're about 40 years old. We're founded by the Smithsonian Institution and the National Academy of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine, and they love research. So what we have done over the past 5 years is we have conducted a randomized control trial study to determine whether in primary schools, so these are ages 5 to 11, when you are engaging students in science, technology, engineering, and math, literacy, and in art in a very integrated way around real-world problems and real-world phenomenon, are you able to improve students' science, reading, and math achievement? This has never been done. This randomized control trial study occurred over 2 states, South Carolina and North Carolina, very different from one another in terms of their standards or what they require for students to learn in elementary school. We worked with 7 different school districts, 37 different schools, and we randomly assigned them to either receive hands-on, innovative, inquiry-centered STEM teaching and learning, or to do their business as usual. And after 5 years, we found that we not only were able to improve students' science ability, so their knowledge, their skills in science, but their reading achievement on their state tests and their math achievement on their state tests. In addition, students were engaging in the kinds of skills that you would expect in the workforce. They were problem solving, working in groups, collaborating, thinking creatively and innovatively, building and solving problems through engineering. These are the foundational skills that are crucial if we're going to build a complex workforce that's prepared for things, of course, as you said at the beginning, 65% of the jobs that our young students who are 5 to 18 will face don't even exist today. So fundamentally, how can we improve their knowledge and skills in a problem-solving environment when sometimes the facts will change? And now we know that we have evidence that this type of sparking their interest in STEM really does make a difference.
Thank you, Carol. So one of the things, pivoting a little bit, and I'm going to come to you next, Maria, is, we've been talking amongst our foundation team about we don't want to just touch people's lives. We want to change the trajectory of a life. We all know somebody who came from a really low-income household, and none of their parents didn't go to school or higher education, and then one of them did, and they kind of pulled the family forward out of generational poverty. And those are very meaningful stories for many of us. I have colleagues at work who come from that environment as well. So we're focused on that. We're focused on low-income households. We want to make sure that we can really change that trajectory of a life. And Maria, I understand that Jobs from the Future has done some research in this area around how do you really target that population? So what are some of the learnings that you've found in this field?
Sure, yes, I'll touch on a few. And I think to your point, there's some research by Raj Chetty at Opportunity Insights that's really saying that, too often now folks or young people today are not doing better than their parents. Mm-hmm. They're doing worse. And so as a nation, we really run the risk of backsliding. And so I think doubling down on real strategies that can drive economic mobility and help folks kind of move up the path is really needed. So I think there are multiple challenges that we're looking at. And so one, which I think gets a lot of needed attention, is how do we increase the 4-year degree attainment rate. So that is one big bucket, but I'm actually going to focus on the other bucket that I feel doesn't get enough attention, which is how are we helping young people really know about and access the high quality non-degree pathways that exist. So I think so much of the conversation is around the traditional path, and I think we need to be shining a brighter light on what the other opportunities are. So we do a lot of work around the expansion of registered apprenticeship programs, for example, which have an extremely strong evidence base around return on investment, both for the employer as well as the near end, like long-term earnings for the apprentice. So like we consider that kind of the gold standard in workforce development. It's a model that has some of the strongest evidence base over time. And often when folks think of apprenticeships, they think of traditional skilled trades roles, right, which are critical and provide like really strong economic opportunity for folks. But over the past 10 years or so, there's been a big press on expanding apprenticeships into what you would call non-traditional fields. So things like finance or healthcare or insurance or cybersecurity and so on. And just recently, the U.S. Department of Labor announced that those like non-traditional apprenticeships are actually now the majority. So we've kind of like, I think, succeeded in broadening the aperture, but still too often young people aren't like aware of these opportunities. They don't know how to go about accessing them. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done around kind of navigation and supports. And then, I think as Craig was saying, I think this overall much needed move like away from like a degree framework into a skills-based framework really is an opportunity to open up huge opportunities for folks who don't have four-year degrees. So, and I think that is going to continue to take work both on the employer side in terms of helping folks like re-look at their hiring process, like how they're screening candidates, but also on the education side, like how are education providers really helping young people and older workers really know like what their skill sets are and how that translates into the labor market. So those are some of the trends that we're keeping an eye on.
And this is a perfect segue into my next question. I'm kind of coming to you next, Craig, but I do want to share an anecdotal story because you're right about even people more advanced in their careers are feeling this pressure of now what do I do? And I will never forget the video that we had of an employee at Medtronic who worked the floors, and he was in his late 40s, and he accessed our Multiple Pathways Initiative program and got a degree for the first time, got his first promotion after many, many, many years. Those are the stories that, in the world where there's a whole anti-DEI movement, but then you go back and you watch that video and know it's all worth it, and the work that we need to continue to do is really, really valuable. So InStride has been a partner not just to us at Medtronic, but with many of the Business Roundtable member companies to identify thousands of jobs. I know we've done a lot, but in this space there's plenty. Jobs that are skill-based to remove this kind of degree requirement. So Craig, can you tell us more about your approach and the impact that you have seen through these programs, through that kind of cohort of the Business Roundtable?
Yeah, and just to say it, I actually, you have to know your own employee population, because I don't think it's an either or. It's probably more of a rebalancing, if you will, right? Because certain folks are going to want the degrees, certain folks are not. And so having programs for both to enable their specific paths are important. So when it comes to the re-credentialing, it really started with taking a look at the job families. Then we worked with the HR team to break those down to identify the specific criteria for those jobs. We had our own taxonomy, and we embedded a little AI to help us with the process. But basically, we moved some of those requirements out from the credential or the degree labels into skills-based, and basically rolled out. Again, I think we're up over 150 different roles. And to think that it's touching on critical core business areas like HR, finance, operations, sales. Again, if we can do that, it's just going to create this playing field where you don't have to continue to look outside for talent. Your internal pool is really that next generation. So it's the outside in, and then re-credentialing is really how you get the inside up movements. So there's a lot of great stats we'll talk about in a minute.
So to follow up on that, for those who are interested in maybe pursuing a degree while working, can you tell us about your approach in designing tuition assistance programs, and what do employers need to know about, like, how do you make it work, and what results have you seen?
Yeah, and let's just start by getting grounded in tuition assistance programs. So the traditional tuition reimbursement models. Again, this is not a either or, this is an and. There's always going to be a place for traditional tuition reimbursement where the employee fronts the dollar, and then they have to get through the academic program, and then they're reimbursed. And they're reimbursed if sometimes there are parameters around achieving a certain grade, staying a certain period of time, et cetera. But just by default, it's almost like an insurance deductible in ways. If you go with that program exclusively, you're going to eliminate a huge population of your employees because, as we all know, not every adult can tolerate or accept tuition costs. So if you're missing a tranche of your employee base, that's a big miss, particularly if we go back and look at the stats that we talked about earlier. So in our program, it's basically employer funded. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll design these programs that are tied to specific jobs, careers, skills, and we'll create a pathway of education, and the dollars are funded up front by the employer, thus eliminating that hurdle for many of the employees to get in there. And the stats are pretty compelling.
Go ahead, please.
I had to bring out the cheat sheet because the stats are so profound, but when you think about the impact that this has on Medtronic, and so how many eligible employees do you have today?
Roughly 100,000 around the globe.
Okay, so we're approaching 1 million eligible employees across our client base. Over 2,000 employees have enrolled from Medtronic. They have avoided close to $10 million in tuition debt. So there are a lot of ways to deal with debt. We can talk about the philosophies of eliminating debt that exists today, but why not eliminate it on the front end so it's not an issue to begin with? So that's kind of cool. We've had 37 graduates from degrees. 20% of the learners were promoted within 1 year of starting the program. So basically, if you connect the program design and the content of the program to the career, the job, or the role track, you can see that promotions follow in due course. There's incredible engagement across the populations. 90% of the participants were highly engaged and viewed the employer as a great place to work. So when you think about retaining employees, this is a huge factor, and attracting the employees. 80% felt that the employer was supporting their career pathing, so another point of engagement. And then lastly, 63% of the participants were representatives of the classes we just talked about. So when you mix that all together, I can't wait to see what the foundation succeeds, if the target's 1 million. It's going to be pretty cool.
Thank you, Craig. We're really excited about the work and the partnership. It's been an excellent program. And if you know us, folks at Medtronic, we try to strive for excellence. So we are definitely committed.
Well, if you're making pacemakers, I support that.
Right? Yeah. I sure hope so, right? Okay, so this question is going to be for all three of you. And it really is a little, maybe seeking your advice. So what should an organization like Medtronic, embarking on this long-term philanthropic focus that is new to us in terms of how focused it is, that will help solve a business problem, be lesser focused on, sorry, I completely chopped that up. I'm going to read it, so I'm not. So what should an organization like Medtronic, embarking on this long-term focused philanthropic initiative that will help solve a business problem, be lesser focused on to help drive results? So what should we avoid? What are the things that we should not be as focused on? And by extension, like tuning that out to help drive results. Maria, I'll start with you.
Boy, I don't know how possible this is, but I would try to tune out all of the noise that's happening in the world right now, right? And I think stay focused on what works for your workers and what works for your bottom line, and not try to, be reacting to everything that is happening around us, around language and priorities and everything like that. So it's kind of stick to to your mission and your desired outcomes.
Thank you. That's great advice. Craig?
I have to start with my love of finance. So I would say if you're going to invest dollars into these programs, really focus on ROI. You can roll out programs and check box, but it could be wasted dollars if you're not really tracking the impact. And so as you evaluate new programs, and I would urge everybody to, so I'm actually going to talk about what I think you should avoid in a minute, but I think we should avoid the narrative that, one program fits everybody and that there's no innovative solutions out there today. I think that's a false narrative. But back to focusing on ROI, if you embed ROI in the conversation heading into a project and you include it in every stage of the project, you get crystal clear alignment on what you're trying to achieve. So whether it's non-degree programs, whether it's driving certain role evolutions, whether it's trying to fill critical roles, you should have some ROIs tied to that, because if you're going to invest millions of dollars, I'm pretty sure someone's going to ask you at some point, how's that going? Yeah. And so if you don't have the ROI data,
Our board asks us that every quarter.
yeah, right? That's a chuck and duck. So, anyway.
Thank you, Craig.
And for me, I think what I would say is sometimes when you're focused on return on investment, you want immediate results. And a lot of these programs were like, we want to reach 1 million students in low-income areas. Starting young, this is like my mantra, it is a long-term return on investment. So, the story that you told that was so beautiful, Dr. Saba, this idea of, here's this person and they're trying to make a decision about what they want to do, and they go back to studying or getting a degree later in life or credentialed later in life, balancing your professional life, your work life, your home, your family life. That's hard. But if we do a better job of building the foundational knowledge that students need to enter into these credentialing programs or advanced degrees, the better off we're going to be. So I would say that what you should avoid is just focusing on immediate impacts and focus on long-term impacts that are much more sustainable. And that includes an early commitment to foundational learning. So if you don't mind, I'd like to tell very quick stories.
Please.
So for me, this is all about economic mobility. And this idea of developing something that's going to be so important to our success in life, healthcare, technology-driven healthcare. In Hazelwood, which is a neighborhood that I grew up in Pittsburgh, in Pennsylvania, I looked up some of the stats this morning for Hazelwood. Hazelwood is a small neighborhood inside of the city of Pittsburgh, urban, very low socioeconomic status, 4,000 residents in 2024, the average income $35,000, and 43% of the residents are considered low income and do not have more than a high school degree or the equivalent. So the question is, like, how do you help those students, me? When I was living in that neighborhood, the statistics were even worse. So now you've got a story right now where the University of Pittsburgh, where I got my degree in science education, is now giving back to help Hazelwood and the middle school students who live there. So if this could be part of your work, which is that they wanted to use our biotechnology guide from our Smithsonian Science for Global Goals guide project, work with these young students who are in middle school with the University of Pittsburgh and educate them on topics like DNA extraction, food systems and renewable energy, doing hands-on activities that involved micropipette art, biofuel centrifuge experiments, gel electrophoresis, and introduce them to biotechnology at a young age. And this has been a very successful program. They're continuing it. And there was a quote here. There was an article that came out on this, and I love this quote. They basically said, this programming shows how life sciences can positively impact the life of our local community by increasing awareness, providing valuable learning experiences for very young students, and creating pathways to future jobs.
Love it.
So that is not an opportunity I had when I lived in Hazelwood, but I believe that I would have achieved my path to STEM education earlier if I had been given it. So,
Lovely.
so don't give up on those
Don't
early,
give up.
early
Okay,
years.
you just made our case for us.
Yes.
That's really good. I have a couple more questions for the panel, but before we go there, I'd like to open it up for Q&A. If anybody has a question out there, please step up to a mic. There we go. Please introduce yourself and then ask your question.
Sure. My name's Kamsi McAdams. I know Carol well, and I just met you, so that's very nice. And I'm at STEM Next Opportunity Fund. We do a lot of work with JFF. In fact, one thing I wanted to mention is this idea of ROI, and I do really think it's important to always be thinking like, where are we going? What are we going towards? I think Carol's point was really important, that it's a long-term investment, but I also want to consider the variable factors that go in. So I'm trained as a scientist and engineer. I was a teacher. I'm now working in the nonprofit space as a field builder. And I think it's really complicated to parse out whose investment led to the return. And I'd wonder if you could speak a little bit to that, because I'm coming from the out-of-school time space. So the work that Carol does is so important in embedding hands-on and realistic science in the school day, but then kids come out of school and we need to think about how to do both and I'm wondering whether you could speak a little bit to that, to this idea of parsing out whose investment to get to the return, and then also this idea of the both and, the in-school time and then this very important out-of-school time space.
I mean, I can start, which is interestingly enough, Kamsi, this program that I was talking about with the biotechnology was designed for in-school, but in Hazelwood, they did it after school. And the reason is because our school systems are not always caught up with what we need for our education, for our students, to prepare them for the future. So I consider myself an education futurist. And my mind is way ahead of where schools are today. But that's our job, is to transform K-12 education through science. So I would say that find the needs of the community, find the spaces through these ecosystems of these cross-sector collaborations, universities, local manufacturing plants, school systems, and provide the learning experiences that work for that community, whether it's in school or out of school. And so I think, you know, it has to be bespoke for the community's needs.
Well said. Anything to add?
I think my response is a little different in that the investments that are being made and the ROIs being calculated are a little more clean in the sense that the employer is funding the education, but the employee is investing in non-financial ways. And so you have to be able to help them understand. We certainly help our employer clients define the ROI. We've got some pretty interesting methodologies to do that. We've invested a fair amount of dollars to come up with the right sort of tool. Everything from attraction, retention, mobility, et cetera. There are probably 8 to 12 priority levers that we can pull with our clients. But, you know, how do you help the employee measure their own individual ROI, I think is something that employers need to get their heads around, because it's, you know, to get a degree as a working adult takes a lot of time. We actually had one of the Medtronic employees speak at our client conference last year, and to hear him, Scott, tell his story about, he's in sales, and he had some academic trauma early on in his career. He stopped going, and he woke up one day and was like, I gotta get my degree. And it took him, I think, 2.5 years to get it. He was able to transfer some prior coursework and credentials towards that. But when you hear him talk about his own individual ROI, it's super cool and it's inspirational. And not everybody's going to be able to do that. So I think the more we can help individuals do that, the better.
Well said. Anything you want to add, Maria?
I would just comment that I agree with the need to kind of knit together the in-school experiences and the out-of-school time experiences. And I saw that personally a few years ago when I was my daughter's Girl Scout troop leader, right? And it's like, and scouting has like really great resources around STEM, but you realize how disconnected it is from what in that case, the girls were learning in school, and the need to like help them tie those themes and those experiences together. And I feel like that naturally doesn't happen too much.
One quick shameless plug, it is Girl Scout cookie season, so get there and buy your cookies.
Right.
Tag-alongs.
Okay, any other questions? I'm going to pause. Yes, we have one more. Go ahead.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for all your insights. My name is Abby. I'm with Arizona State University's Solar Spell Initiative, also former Girl Scout. I'm thinking about the fact that with 50% of the world's population not having meaningful access to the internet, something we think a lot about where I work, and then thinking about building these health technology skills and this talent pipeline globally, how are you all thinking about, or how do you approach reaching learners in communities that are mostly offline or underconnected?
I love that question. Go ahead.
Could I start? This is a really good question for someone who works at a museum with millions of objects, right? That in these high-touch environments. And so we have a project called Smithsonian Science for Computational Thinking, where we're trying to build the foundation of students' technology skills by embedding computational thinking into the teaching of science. And so we had a project with 80 different school districts who were all rural in the Midwest of the US, where in many places they don't have access to broadband. And so teaching students computational thinking in a high-tech environment often doesn't work in some of these communities, even in the United States. And so we built a resource, Smithsonian Science for Computational Thinking, so that students were, all free, so that students were learning computational thinking and basic coding skills in a high-touch environment, no computers, learning algorithms, et cetera, all the basic competencies for computational thinking, and then taking them along this technology spectrum to then a high-tech environment. And so I think it's fundamental that we recognize that even in the United States, there are places that do not have access to broadband. The digital divide is real. They don't have the technology tools. And so how do we teach basic coding, basic computational thinking to young students to prepare them for these guys so that they are able to learn those competencies fundamentally in the context of real-world problems and real-world phenomena, including the health sciences.
Yeah, I love that. That's a great answer, Carolyn. I really love when people are coming up with these things that maybe, have you considered this? Have you considered that? When we went to the Dominican Republic to do focus groups with our own employees when we were starting this out, much of our own frontline workers said, our sisters and brothers can't participate in your program. They need to work. Our parents need them to work and do that's where our community's at. And those insights were really helpful because we built into our program, okay, how do we give stipends to the family? How do we give them laptops? How do we give them a wireless in their home so they can, so it's been really interesting to learn what the local dynamics of these communities will require for us to really change that trajectory of a life versus think we're doing good, but in the end it's not impactful, so. Yes. Really good. Is there one? There's one more. We're going to take one more. I see a gentleman back there. Go ahead, sir.
My background is economic development, so it's always great to hear, especially at conferences like this, that workforce development is a topic. And we're thinking down that emerging workforce and what needs to be. So my name's Nate Clayberg. I'm with the CAPS Network. I know we're a friend of JFF and the career navigation stuff you guys are getting into. We're looking forward to seeing how we can see where that goes. But when it comes to STEM careers, and I think obviously we need these in all sorts of different areas, how, and I don't know who can answer this, but what work can be done to help, especially when you're looking at some of the low-income populations that Medtronic's looking to support, the awareness of these pathways and opportunities, and also almost giving some of these students permission that you can go after this stuff? I guess what kind of work is being done there from Smithsonian to JFF to Medtronic?
Go ahead.
Yeah, so I completely agree. Right? I think I often think about the investments that are being made federally in the semiconductor industry, and then I think about, like, how are young people, like, even aware that this is a an option, and what does that look like? So to me, like, I think as a nation, we do a pretty terrible job of like providing career navigational supports to both young people and adults. And so that's why, as you mentioned, last year we launched a Center for Career Navigation at JFF in partnership with our friends at American Student Assistance. And it's really starting with a focus on young people, helping them look at pathways that are alternatives to the traditional four-year degree, but really being able to look at, the quality of those options, what the advancement opportunities are, and so forth. And so it's a mix of policy work, thought leadership, research, and then ASA building a technology solution that's going to drive this forward. But I think that, especially as jobs and industries continue to transform so quickly, like our traditional systems just aren't keeping pace, with what's available now and what's going to be available in the future. So we need to just be really investing in better alignment, better information, making sure that information is available to all, and that it's available in ways that resonate with young people and their families. Like I know, like at one point I had my older daughter looking at like some of the ROI statistics on like, colleges, and she was like, "What are you talking about, Ma?" So it's like, how do you help this, how do you deliver information in a way that's actionable and that resonates?
Yeah, and for us at the Smithsonian Science Education Center, it's introducing students to careers from a very young age. So we create resources like our free Women in STEM ebook series, where we're teaching students. We just released one on good health and well-being, women who focus on good health and well-being in their careers. Another one is on women in biotechnology. And while it's not just gender focused, we're telling the story of women, we also introduce students. We made a commitment in 2015 when I came that everything that we did for schools, we would introduce them to people in these careers so that they could see themselves in STEM. Again, recognize themselves in STEM. And that ranges, the jobs that are out there that fall under the category of STEM are so broad. And so the earlier we can get students to see that these careers exist and they're wide ranging, and we expose them to people who do this work, the better off they're able to find that pathway for themselves. And that includes in the arts. Smithsonian, of course, there's a lot of science that comes out of the Smithsonian that's actually at our art museums. So it's helping them to see that there are many different paths they can take and still give back to society using STEM skills.
Those are great responses, and I'll add just for Medtronic that we're still figuring that out almost a little bit, because we are a B2B organization. And for us to find a way to reach this youth in Hazelwood and other places is a new kind of territory for us. So I would have never imagined that my comms amazing team is going to be thinking about TikTok channels and things like that for the work that we do. But when I went to Brazil recently, every person in Brazil, no matter how poor you are, have a phone. So you can actually reach them, and we just as organizations have to get creative in different ways and use good marketing skills to understand the audience you're trying to target and things like that. So I think it's going to be exciting for us to solve those interesting challenges to really find this youth that we're targeting. We have a few more minutes, so I'm going to turn it back. I have two quick questions. We're going to go quick on each one, so each one just 1 minute. But imagine now I gave you each kind of a crystal ball, and you're looking into the future. What is your biggest prediction for the future of work or the reimagining of education? I'll start with you, Craig.
So I'll start by saying I grew up in the healthcare and benefits industry, and so this is not an indictment of that industry, but I will say there are plenty of winners and losers in that sector. So when premiums go up, someone has to pay for those. Access to care, using care can be confusing, et cetera. I'm super lucky and honored to be at InStride, because if we do our jobs well, everybody wins. The employer achieves their human capital goals, employees get mobility, career pathing, higher paying wages, et cetera. The academic partners that we work with, including Arizona State, they have a whole new channel by which to educate the world. And in Striders, we get to benefit from serving the mission. So it's a hope and a view that, you know, the collision of education and workforce development is only going to get stronger and more tangible, given the path we've seen over the last 4 or 5 years.
Nice. Carol, what's your prediction?
My prediction is that we will, while the nation recognizes its limitations and some of the fundamental knowledge that students gain during school because of these tests, I would say that it is moving towards understanding that it's not just about academics, that we also have to help students see how they can use knowledge for social good. It goes back to what you said at the very beginning, that students can use their knowledge and their skills to improve their lives and the lives of the people around them. So I'm hoping that one day we see the importance of bringing together community-based learning with academic learning.
Love that. Maria?
So my hope is that we are moving towards like a comprehensive lifelong learning system in this nation that really enables every worker and learner to find the path that works for them, the ability for them to finance that path, and the ability for them to flourish along that path. And you know, right now we have such a fragmented system, right, especially at the federal level, that's built upon, you know, antiquated programs that were designed for the New Deal era, like versus what we need today and for the future. And so, you know, how do we start to move towards a more comprehensive, equitable system that is both meeting the needs of the individual and like meeting the needs of the employers? So I think we have a ways to go to get there, but my hope is that I think between, you know, what we're hearing, I think particularly from young people today, like in the voice of Gen Z, is that we're going to be pushed to move to that place further, which I think is great.
Well said. Thank you. Okay, we're going to, final question. We're going to move out of our heads and into our hearts now to close it out with a little heart. So we've heard from all of you today the why behind your organization. That's clear. What I would love to hear, what I'd love you to share with our audience is, what's your personal why for the work that you get up to do every day? Anybody can start.
So I would say for me, and because this is my own personal story, is that education, the reason I got into education is because I know that education is the key to generational wealth, economic mobility. And so when I looked up the facts of like what cities in the country are doing the best job to move people out of poverty, and believe it or not, Austin, Texas was like number 2. So something's going on here in Austin that's helping people who are born into poverty, like myself, and are able to get out of it. And so when they, in this study about Austin, Texas, like what are the factors that help people move out of economic poverty? It was, of course, education. So that's why I got into education. It matters to us. And when people are able to advance through economic mobility, it improves their lives and it improves their health. And that's the focus of this work, and that's why education is so important. So.
Thank you, Craig.
My why is probably same neighborhood, different house. And it's personal, and so it's a combination of my own learning journey and a tribute to my mom. So I'll tell a quick story if I may. So back in the Vietnam War, my mom and dad relocated to Southeast Asia, where my father was an operations officer with the Central Intelligence Agency. And one day went out on a mission and never came back. His helicopter crashed into the jungles of Laos. And so, so think about my mom, who was 25 years old. She was widowed in Asia with an 8-month-old and pregnant with me. So statistically, I was in that category we talked about earlier. And without her commitment to education and what she did to enable me, I shouldn't be here. I wouldn't be here. So being able to pass that forward is important to me.
Thank you. Talk about heart. Thank you. Maria, close us out with yours.
Yeah, so it's very similar. It goes back to my parents, who were both born in Depression-era farming families in the New Jersey area, and I was the youngest of 4 kids. I have 3 older brothers who are much older than me, and my view was really seeing my parents working 5 jobs between the 2 of them to put both my father through college when he was in his 40s and 50s, my older brothers through college, and then me. And then later on in their careers, both my parents ended up working kind of in the workforce in career and technical education space. And so to me, what drives me is the power that work plays in a person's life, and how quickly work changes and shifts, and the worry that as systems we're not keeping pace with that. And I was struck, I got in an Uber in DC a week or so ago, and it was interesting, a lot of times people ask, what do you do for work? And what the question that the Uber driver asked me was, how many jobs do you have? And it was just a reminder back to my parents of, how many people are struggling and juggling multiple jobs. And he thought it was just such privilege, that I only have 1 job, which was really, really struck a nerve for sure.
Yeah. Puts life in perspective.
Yeah.
It does.
I have learned from each of you. I appreciate your expertise, your authenticity, your vulnerability, and everything you've shared with us today. So thank you from the bottom of Medtronic's heart. Why don't we give our amazing panel a great round of applause? Thank you. And we look forward to you following Medtronic Spark and more to come. Thank you all for joining us.